Welcome once again, everyone. We'll get started in just one more moment. See if anybody else is joining us this morning. But to start, of course, my name is Dr. Andrea Drews, and I'm here to talk more about crafting your digital story for the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge. And we'll get started in just one more moment. All right, I think in interest of time, we'll just get started. So good morning, everyone. As I said, my name is Dr. Andrea Drews. I'm a professor of teacher education at Rider University in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. I'm so happy to be a part of the team that has worked to develop and share the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge with all of you. So over the past couple of years, actually, now that we're in our second year of this program, I've had the opportunity to work very closely with Sustainable Jersey for this project. Sustainable Jersey and the Sustainability Institute at the College of New Jersey is a nonprofit organization focused on supporting local actions on addressing today's environmental, economic, and social challenges through projects like Sustainable Jersey for Schools certification program. And I also, of course, want to thank our program partners, Atlantic City Electric, Exelon Foundation, and the Drumthwacket Foundation for sponsoring the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge. Climate change, and specifically climate change education, is a really important issue for me for a number of reasons. Climate change education is important to me personally because I know that the impacts of this climate crisis is real. They're real. And too often, the adults currently in charge aren't doing enough to fight this global environmental problem. But as a former 7th and 8th grade science teacher, I know how passionate young people are about their world, and I've seen firsthand how students can have a positive impact in their communities around environmental issues. And I want to do everything that I can to support students in these efforts. So that's why I'm here with all of you today. All right, so that's a little bit about me. Now, if you want to take a moment, I'd love to hear a little bit about you. To get to know everyone, why don't you can type your school into the chat at this point. Make sure when you're typing into the chat that you select panelists and attendees, that option above the chat box, or it might be labeled as everyone above the chat box when you're sending it. That way we can all see it. And if you're watching this as a recording, thanks so much for joining us. We're happy to have you. Awesome. Thanks, folks. All right. So thanks so much for joining us today. So now for the rest of the session, our goal is to share some tips and tricks for crafting a successful digital story entry into the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge. So briefly, just to kind of give you a heads up of where we're going, I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenge itself. Hopefully you were able to tune in and either watch live or watch the recording of our kickoff session, which was fantastic. We had an amazing youth activist in New Jersey, Swan Mora, who shared so much really just fantastic information about how she's gotten involved around climate action and how you can get involved too. So I definitely recommend, if you weren't able to catch that live, please go watch the recordings. I'll share the links in just a few minutes where all the recordings for our sessions are going to be, could be found. So yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about the challenge itself, some lessons learned, and some tips and suggestions for you all. As you work on integrating and kind of participating in the challenge this year. I'll highlight some of the resources that are available, as well as the rubric that we'll be looking at when we are scoring your projects. And then I hope to have a little bit of time at the end for any Q&A that might happen. All right, so the challenge itself, it's open to grades, students in grades 6 through 12. We're looking for teams of students to participate anywhere between 2 to 12 students. In essence, what you're going to be doing in teams is you're going to work to complete a school or a community project that addresses either the human causes of climate change or the impacts of climate change on your local environment. And through the challenge, you're going to not only do this project, but you're also going to be producing a 3 to 5 minute digital story about your action project. And that's really going to be the focus of where we're taking this session today. But just to, again, give you a little more background information, the timeline for the challenge. So if you're watching this as a recording, we're currently in February 4th, but we will be doing these educational sessions, which I'll share lots more information about throughout the month of February. And then you have February and March, and April is when we're hoping to get your challenge submissions. Through the month of May, we'll be announcing some of the challenge finalists. And then in June, we hope to have our awards ceremony. And just to let you know, I think I forgot to mention this at the last session, but there are some pretty nice awards for the winning entries. So in both middle school and high school categories, there are awards of $2,500 for first place, $1,000 for second place, and $500 for third place. And those are monies that go to your school to help support more climate action projects. All right. So just so that you're aware, we have a bit.ly address, so that bit.ly/NJ Student Climate Challenge, where you can find lots more resources, including a teacher guide, a student guide, some of the official rules, a brochure with more information in general about the session. And you'll also be able to find, especially this notice for the teachers, please, it really would help us to register your classes. You can find the registration links for these educational sessions, the Zooms. You can find the recordings of these sessions, but also you teachers, you can register for the contest itself so that we can continue to share more information with you as we get closer to the deadline. So don't forget to register, though, of course, registering for the challenge does not force you to submit something. We know life is a little bit bonkers right now with coronavirus and evolving plans, but it does help us to keep an eye on numbers and can keep you all informed as well. So please register. All right, so let's get right to it. Tips around improving your digital story. So throughout the session today, I'm going to focus on these 3 tips. First and foremost, to tell a story, right? A digital story. It's not a surprise that you're going to be telling a story in a digital story. The second tip is I'm going to ask you to be really thinking about the focus of your project and its connection to climate change. And then the third, some ideas and strategies around completing that very specific action project and to describe it well in your submission write-up that you actually send in for your entry. And we'll talk more about those in just a few minutes. But first, digital storytelling. This might be a new kind of idea for you. And so what sets a digital story apart from just any other video that you might see online? Well, typically we think of digital stories as really having that personal storytelling component to it. We're not just conveying information. You're not just reading slides from a PowerPoint. You're not just, reading a bunch of facts or figures that, are kind of cut and dry. A digital story is really going to have that narrative, that story behind it that engages the audience, that gets, if I were watching your video, I would be excited. I would be rooting for you as you overcome challenges. I would be on the edge of my seat, or I would be laughing and, having those compelling elements to it. So that's what really sets it apart. Digital storytelling also follows these 3 C's. So first and foremost, digital storytelling allows us to connect on that emotional level with one another about events but really about your lived experience. So what it means for you in the case of these digital stories, what it means for you to deal with and to live in a world that is facing this climate crisis, and what we all, and you specifically, have done about that. Digital storytelling, those stories also allow us to communicate our perspective, to share how our realities around the climate crisis in your community, but also to lift up your own voice about why this is important to you and what we should be all doing about it. And then finally, digital stories are always going to be collaborative in nature. They're both on the creative side of things when we're creating the stories, but also when we're sharing them. There's this collaborative element to it that we want to make sure that we always include. So as you're thinking about the story that you want to tell, I'll kind of throw these 6 questions up here. But more so, I want you to be thinking about this as you are working towards creating your digital story in the future, especially for this New Jersey Student Climate Challenge Action Project. So first, thinking about why the climate crisis is an important issue to you. How is it affecting your life, or how is it affecting your community? These are the kind of questions that you'll be sharing, or the answers to these questions rather, is what you'll be sharing in your digital story. But then kind of the second part of your digital story will focus on how you and your teammates are taking action and what steps were needed to complete that action, maybe including ideas around what challenges you experienced when you were completing your projects, and also what were you and your team members able to accomplish in your climate action project. And then one of the pieces that often gets forgotten in these digital stories is, as your audience member, I want to learn a little bit more too. It's great to hear about, first we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this, but I want to know about why those actions were important. And so making sure to incorporate in your digital story an explanation about how your actions through your project had a positive impact to combat climate change. So those are the kind of 6 questions I'll ask you to consider as you're creating your digital story. But for now, what I would like to do is I am going to share some additional, oops, one moment. Got ahead of myself, sorry folks. So share some additional tips and tricks from an expert. So we're going to watch a short video from Jared Flesher, who has been recently named as New Jersey's leading environmental documentary filmmaker. And his production company is called 100 Year Films. So we have a short video. If you just give me one moment to share that.
Hello filmmakers, video producers, visual storytellers of all kinds. Here we are on planet Earth, the one that's not too hot or too cold. I understand that some of you are about to take on a challenging project, telling stories about the impact of climate change in your communities. The reason I'm here today talking to you is because I make documentary films and videos for a living. A lot of my work has been about the environment, and a lot of it has been specifically about environmental issues in southern New Jersey. So the first thing I want to do is welcome you to the club. No one gives you permission to be a filmmaker or a storyteller, and you don't need to ask for permission. All you need is a story you want to tell and the determination to tell it to the best of your ability. So the moment you pick up a camera with the intention to tell a true story, whether it be a camera like this one or even just the camera on your phone, you become a filmmaker. I hope you take this job seriously. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. We all do. But be confident in your own ability and the power of your own voice. Here's a big secret. Telling stories about climate change can be really hard, and even the adults have not figured out the perfect way to do it. That's where you come in. People who study communication around climate change have realized 2 things lately. One is that older people, like your parents and grandparents, are far more likely to listen to stories about climate change when they come from young people like you than if they come from politicians or even scientists. So your voice really matters. And 2 is that climate change can sometimes feel like a really abstract issue, like something that's happening way out there in the atmosphere or some other place. But when you tell stories about how climate change impacts people at the local level, in their own communities, in your own communities, a lot more people are willing to listen. So what makes a good story? Well, stop for a moment and think about your own personal favorite stories, whether it be a movie or a book. The reason you like that story, I'm willing to bet, isn't because it's full of facts and figures and information. Those things do matter, the details. But what most people love about stories is the way the stories make them feel. So when you set out to tell your stories about climate change, keep this in mind. How do you want viewers to feel when they're done watching? Something else that most good stories have are interesting characters. Characters that you come to know and care about. When I set out to make a new film, I usually do have an issue in mind, or at least a question I'm trying to answer. But really, I feel like I'm not ready to start telling my story until I figure out who are the characters who are going to help bring my story to life. You might make yourself a character, and that can be really effective. But don't forget that you can also feature other people in your community and make them characters too. Now, this might seem really basic, but it's important to remember. Stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So at the beginning of the story, you usually meet your characters and you find out that they have some sort of problem or obstacle they need to overcome. And then in the middle of the story, you need to show them working, maybe even struggling to overcome that problem. And then at the end of the story, maybe they'll succeed. Maybe they won't. But this is where the drama is, following your character's journey from beginning to end. One more thing before I go. I hope you'll keep in mind some of the storytelling tips I just shared. They've worked well for thousands of years for millions of storytellers. But at the end of the day, the truth is there are no rules. You can tell your story however you want. You don't even need to ask permission. Good luck, and I can't wait to see some of your stories.
All right, I always love that video. And I think it really gets the point across that you are telling so many important stories that I couldn't tell those stories. Only you are able to tell those stories about why climate change is important to you and why you're taking action. So we'll let me just go ahead and pull up my slides once more. All right, hopefully you're able to see that again. All right, so yes, as Jared was saying, there are so many important things, but you're trying to consider how we feel, how the story makes you feel, and get us on your side, get us, cheering for you as you are able to accomplish so many great things through your digital story. So those are really some of the goals with a digital story itself. More suggestions and technical tips. So suggested software for capturing video. You can definitely use any kind of smartphone. You could use other types of cameras as well. Suggestions on software and programs to help you edit the video and to provide some narration of the video, to do a little bit more than just reading PowerPoint slides like I'm doing. I know you all can do it, an even better story than what I'm doing right now. Adding music, resources around, balancing the music to the words, those things. More technical guides are available to you in the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge Teacher and Student Guide. And then for other ideas about how other organizations and other students have shared their own climate stories, here are 4 fantastic resources that are also available in the Teacher and Student Guide. They are ACE, there's Young Voices for the Planet video series, which is a series of phenomenal student action projects around climate change and the environment. Green Ninja Film Festival, which kind of is a fun play on many different types of stories and lessons we can learn. And then a Lens on Climate Change. So lots of great resources out there that all help you to think about telling that story. So again, so that was the first tip that I have for you when you're crafting your digital story, is to actually tell a story. Tell the who, tell the what, tell the when, the how, and more importantly, the why things are happening. All right, so my next tip for creating your digital story for the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge is to really hone in on the connection to climate change. often we think about climate change in a number of different ways. We have human activity, which we kind of think about as the causes of climate change. They all build into this increased concentration of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, which then leads to climate change, which then ultimately leads to many different negative impacts. As you're creating your your climate action project, I want you to really think about either you're focusing on decreasing some of the human activity, which are the causes of climate change, which we refer to as mitigation, or you're helping us to learn how to live with those negative impacts, which then we call that adaptation. So you can take these different connections to climate change in a number of different ways, all depending on what your action project is, what part of climate change you want to try to tackle. So whether you are interested in like decreasing the amount of deforestation in your local community, if you want to help protect shade trees or street trees in your area, then you are going to be focusing on the mitigation strategy that relates to maybe increasing recycled paper usage or native tree plantings. And that all relates to the human cause of climate change, which is deforestation. Really driving down to explain, well, we are protecting trees because trees absorb carbon dioxide, which is excess from because of human activity, and really getting into some of the details around why saving trees, for example, or planting new trees and native plants can help to fix or alleviate some of climate change because of its alleviating our actions or solving some of the problems. Similarly, if you're thinking about adaptation, if you're worried about some of the severe weather that we've been having, I know the past few days here where I am in the central part of the state, it's been some crazy flooding day after day after day of how much rain we're getting. So if you want to tackle that problem in your local community, don't just tell me about how you created a rain garden in your school yard, but tell me about why a rain garden actually was helpful to combat these negative impacts of climate change. Well, a rain garden, for example, is going to help absorb some of that extra water that comes from these heavy rain events or severe weather. So really driving down to make that connection between your action and climate change, not just kind of telling me what you did, but why what you did as an action project makes a difference. So, you know, if you're doing a mitigation project, I really want you to explain and think about why that project helps to cut down on some of the causes of climate change. Or if you're doing an adaptation project, tell me about why your project and your actions are helping to decrease some of those negative impacts from climate change. All right, so that was my second tip. My third tip is really to think about the project that you are completing. So complete a project. This is not just like a thought exercise of, well, I wish, you know, we had $1 million and then we could install solar panels across every house in our community. Well, that's a great idea, but not very realistic. So we want you to be thinking about telling a story about an action project that you have completed. So there's many different types of action projects that are absolutely appropriate. Anything that kind of relates to changing physical environment, a physical change to your environment at your school, in your community, at a local park, thinking about how you can do a project to help reduce one of those climate change causing factors, but having increased awareness, that's really important. In some communities, that's the need right now, is to help your community members and stakeholders in your community maybe your school board of education, maybe a local decision makers at a mayor's level, et cetera, help them to understand more through either civic engagement or other advocacy projects. So to help you really bring home what you're doing, right? So you need to actually do something. So you might still be thinking as I say this, well, I don't know what I want to do. And even if I knew what I wanted to do, I wouldn't know how to take the first step. Well, that's where our project, the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge, is here to help you with that. So over the next month, we have ton of action-focused student sessions coming up. Thinking about how you can bring a zero waste effort to your school or your community, thinking about how you can learn more about why idling cars or idling buses can be a problem for climate change. All of these different sessions are coming up over the next few weeks and will provide lots more specific information about how to support you in learning about how your actions are related to climate change, but also how you can take the next step and actually do something. That it's not just a learning process, right? It's really important to learn about climate change and its impacts and its causes, but we want to encourage you to do something about it, okay? Something that's important to you and your local community. So we have lots of sessions coming up for students. All to register for these sessions, you can check out the bit.ly, and maybe if Renee or Joanna, you could drop the link into the chat, that would be awesome. I'll post it at the end of the slides as well, but we have lots of sessions coming up for students as well as professional development for teachers. As a former middle school science teacher, I don't know that I would have been able to support my teachers, or my students rather, 100% in some of these efforts. So we're here as project team members to help support you as teachers to support your students in these projects. So please come on and check out one of our professional developments coming up. Again, it would be great to register in advance. These are all happening on Zoom, but all of these recordings, all of these sessions are being recorded, both the student action sessions and the teacher professional development sessions will all be recorded and posted for you. And one thing I forgot to mention is that we had a kickoff session on a few days ago, and it was fantastic. I highly recommend checking it out. Swan Moore from Newark Academy, I believe she was a sophomore, I forget, sorry Swan. But she gave a presentation about her climate activism and how you can get involved too. And I felt it was really just perfect for that you can hear from other students and not just old adults like me. But so definitely check that out if you haven't had a chance yet. So then the last part of that tip that I was saying, for a digital story is to complete an actual project. Well, the teacher in me has to remind you that there is a rubric here. So we will be evaluating your projects using a rubric that is available to you now. So this rubric has two parts, and the full rubric can be found in the teacher guide and the student guide, which is available on our website. Additionally, I just want to point out two things. So the rubric is focused around the video itself, so the digital story that we're talking about right now. And there are three kind of areas where you can earn points for your video. First is around the creative elements of your video. So we want you to, again, be telling us that story, engage us in what you did, how you were able to do it, and do this in a creative way that kind of is engaging and interesting to us as your audience. Second, your video will earn points for being able to clearly talk about how your action project was related to climate change and how you can describe why what you did makes a difference for climate change. And then finally, really focusing on solutions. So we all know stories about the devastating impacts of climate change. We hear them day in and day out on the news, and we hear them around us, and we see the impacts in our local communities. And they are sad, and they are anxiety provoking for many people, myself included. But in these videos, we want to help empower you to take action and to be pushing through that anxiety to do something about it and to be solutions oriented. And so that's where we want your video to be sharing that information as well. Yes, climate change is a terrible situation, but it's not too late. We absolutely can be doing something about climate change to have a positive impact in our local community. So those are the three areas where your video will be able to earn points for your submission into the contest. And then you also will be submitting a written kind of component as well. So the written application, we will ask you again to very clearly describe that cause and effect relationship between your actions and climate change. Secondly, your other kind of project components that we ask you to write about and describe, we want to make sure that we are really understanding what you did, why you did what you did. And so we're hoping that these other written components are going to be well described, thoroughly detailed, with good information about the design of your project and also the completion of it. So don't forget to complete both parts, both the video and the written components that go along with it. Sorry. So again, to kind of wrap up this session in just a few minutes, and then we'll take questions if there are any questions. But remember, as we're thinking about telling your story, crafting rather, a digital story around your action project for the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge, I would recommend thinking about these 6 questions. And this might actually help you think about what project would be good for you and your classmates as well. But thinking about why the climate crisis is important to you, how is it impacting you and your community members right now? Because I promise you, it is impacting us right now. And then 3, 4, and 5, kind of thinking about the project itself. How are you taking action? What steps did you do? What challenges do you encounter? And what were you able to accomplish? Because I know you all will be able to do great things. And then finally, explaining why those great things that you did, those action steps that you took, why they will have a positive impact to combating climate change. So remember, that's really the story we'd like you to be telling in your own words and through your own action projects. All right, so to recap one last time, these 3 tips for creating an amazing digital story is to, first and foremost, tell a story. Tell us what you did, when you did it, how you did it, and why. Secondly, to really be focusing in on those connections to climate change. You know, talking about a project that had to do with littering, for example, that's not a very strong connection to climate change. Now, don't get me wrong, littering is a terrible thing to do and you know, an important problem in our environment. However, not a super strong connection to climate change. So think about completing an action project that has that clear connection to climate change, either on the mitigation side or the adaptation side of things. And then finally, do your project and tell us about it. And then, you know, kind of do those extra little written components that go along with it that help to fully describe your project. And I'm sure you will be able to put together an amazing digital story and hopefully win some money for you and your classmates to continue your action at your school in the future. So that's where I will close for right now. For more information, I see we've gotten some of the links in the chat. For you to find more information. There's also an email if you ever have any questions, but I strongly encourage you to check out any of the bit.lys. They all kind of lead back to the Sustainable Jersey for Schools website, which has lots more information, even has the recordings from last year's New Jersey Student Climate Challenge if you want to check anything out, and all the places to register for this year's sessions as well. So thank you so much for your time and attention. I'm going to stop my share. Yeah, I'll stop my share now. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat and I'd be happy to address them now. If you don't have any questions, that's fine too. But I'll give a moment or two if anybody's typing. I'm not seeing any immediate questions. But once again, lots of information at the bit.ly, which is bit.ly/NJ, both capital, Student Climate Challenge. And all 3 of those words are capital. So capital S, capital C, capital C. if you're watching this on the recording and you can't see the chat. But lots more information available for you, lots of resources, both around the creative components, support for completing the action projects, and then also the creative aspects as well. So don't be a stranger. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and we would be more than happy to provide guidance if you have any questions. And again, with lots of upcoming sessions to support you as well in this endeavor. So good luck, have fun, and I can't wait to see what you're able to accomplish. Thanks all.